I am the youngest of 6 brothers. And so I know I'm not a youngster anymore, but I've got 5 brothers who are older than me. And we grew up in a little town called Birmingham, Michigan, a suburb of Detroit. And so as I was growing up, I roomed with my brother Dave. We had bunk beds because there were 6 of us in a house, along with my parents. It got crowded, so my brother Dave and I shared a room for many, many years. And he was 5 years older than me. And so he got to drive a car before I did. And he loved cars. He owned a Le Mans, a Chevelle, a Camaro, big block Camaro, big block Chevelle, Trans Ams, the cool years, 71, 72, 73, those Trans Ams, Corvettes. And along the way, he started learning about flipping cars. And I don't even know that he called it flipping cars back in the 70s, but he was buying and selling used cars. And he discovered, for instance, that you could buy a gold Corvette with a black interior and repaint it red and make so much money that it would pay for the paint job and you'd make a profit. Who buys a gold Corvette? I don't know. But people want red Corvettes. Same thing at the same time. Blue Trans Ams were not as popular as white Trans Ams. He'd buy a blue and repaint it white, sell it, make a profit. So he's always got these cool cars coming and going. And as I get closer and closer to driving age, I tell Dave, I say, Dave, I'm saving up my money. I want to buy a car. Will you help me buy a car? And by that, I wanted him to go with me and look at cars and give me advice, because I don't want to buy a piece of junk. I'm not actually asking for much help beyond that. But my brother Dave said, save up your money and I'll help you buy a car. When I finished my junior year of high school, I had $1,000 cash in the bank, which in that year was a lot of money. You could buy a car with that. So I said, Dave, I've got the money, let's buy a car. He goes, I'm going to keep my eyes peeled for you. His friend had a friend who said, hey, my parents are trying to sell the family's extra car. We've got an extra car. So Dave goes, we got a car for you. We found a car for you. What is it? 69 Dodge Charger. Now, I was not so attuned with the auto world at that time, where my first question was, which one is that? Because there was a 66, 67 that looked a certain way. Then the second generation, 68, 9, and 70 looked a different way. And then the 71s beyond looked a third way. And I didn't like the ones outside of that. I liked the 68s and 69s. My brother goes to the 69 Dodge Charger, just like in Dirty Mary, Crazy Larry. That's the movie. Because Dukes of Hazzard hadn't come out yet. So prior to Dukes of Hazzard, it was a Dirty Mary, Crazy Larry car. In that car movie, the car was a star. There were people in it, but no one cares. It was the cars, okay? And the 69 Dodge Charger was a star of that movie. And I go, oh, I remember that car. Great, let's go look at this car. Guy wants $300 for this car. We drive over to Sterling Heights, pull up the driveway, and there's a green Dodge Charger in the driveway with a perfectly straight body, no impact or collision damage, but acres of rust. Rust that you could see from space. Quarter panels missing. Holes through the front wheel well fenders. Just a catastrophe of rust, which happens in Michigan. Michigan salts its roads like they're being eaten by people with bad diets. There's more salt than snow sometimes. Everything is salted and it just dissolves cars. And I go, Dave, I realize it's a $300 car, but this thing's a piece of junk. And he said, let's take it for a drive. It's got a 383 with a torque flight, automatic transmission. Those things are bulletproof. 383 ain't bad either. So we take it for a drive. The thing runs great. Interior's in perfect condition. In fact, it's a special edition, which has power windows, leather seats, air conditioning, and a bunch of other options that weren't commonly found on a 69 Dodge Charger. We're driving it. He goes, this is a great car. Buy this car. I go, no, this car's a nightmare. I don't want to buy this car. It's a joke. He goes, well, here's the deal. I'm between cars right now. I don't have a project right now. If you pay for the painting and the repair materials, I'll fix this car for you as if it's one of the cars I'm flipping. I go, really? What's that going to cost me? And he goes, another $300. So I bought the car. We went home. We went to a place called United Paint, and we bought paint, primer, tape, sandpaper, Bondo. I think we bought more Bondo than paint, but that's what you got to do. And my brother says, Steve, you don't know anything about fixing up cars. Don't worry about it. I'll take care of this. So I'm out doing my typical thing, driving my tow truck, going to the gas station, hanging out with my friends. But every evening I'd come home and check on the progress on my car. So one day he's got a bunch of stuff sanded down. A little while later, it's cleaned up. And then there's Bondo, rough sanding on the Bondo, finish sanding, primer, sanding, the whole process. 2 weeks later, rolls this thing out of the garage. Yellow 69 Dodge Charger with a black RT stripe. He even painted the stripe. We didn't go buy the stripe. We painted the stripe. It looks amazing. Absolutely amazing. And now the car is a work of art. 383, 2-barrel when I got it, but the gas mileage was too good, so I put a 4-barrel on. Of course, I treated the thing like it had an on-off switch for an accelerator pedal. Just it did a lot of harsh accelerations, let's say. And this car was gorgeous. It was gorgeous. I would be driving down the street and people would come over and start yelling, "Oh my God, I love your car." Because in 1979, these cars had already been disappearing from the roads. I saw very few 69 Dodge Chargers on the road back then. Today, I only see them at car shows. So many of them got destroyed by the weather. So many got destroyed by the producers of the Dukes of Hazzard. Destroyed hundreds of those cars, literally. And I'm driving this car, and this is the first car I get to drive to high school. My senior year of high school, I got to drive this car. I had other friends with cool cars. I was in their class of cars, okay? A friend of mine was gifted a 1980 Trans Am for his birthday. And I actually thought, I don't care. My 69 Dodge Charger is cooler. May not have been worth as much money in paper, but it was cool. I had people offering to buy the car from me. It was insane. I worked at the gas station. If I drove it to the gas station, if I parked it any place near the road, people would stop and come out and look at it, hoping it was for sale. Never had for sale signs in the window, but people would, "Oh my gosh, this car's so cool. This car's so cool." And so I got to drive that car my senior year of high school. It came with 90,000 miles on it. I ran it up to 160 or 170 before I finally got rid of it. I drove it to college. I drove it to my first job in Bad Axe, Michigan. When I got fired in Bad Axe, I drove it home for my first job in Bad Axe, Michigan, radio. And I drove it for a few more years. And finally, it was starting to rust a little bit and fall apart a little bit. One problem with Bondo, when used too liberally, it's not the preferred way to really restore a car. And that wasn't our intention. I didn't have the money to take this thing out and put it on a rotisserie and, cut in new body metal. That wasn't what we're doing. This was my first car. I had $600 all in on that car. Purchase price, $300. When the time came to get rid of it, one of my other brothers needed a car. And I sold it to him for $300. And the amazing thing about this story is that when I think back on all of my life and thinking about cars and owning cars and writing about cars and representing people who bought cars, my car story begins with the 69 Dodge Charger that my brother painted for me and didn't charge me a penny for 2 weeks of hard labor, half the time wearing a breather and working some kind of thing that's generating clouds of dust and all kinds of other stuff. And he actually said, "Just go off and do what you're going to do. Come back in 2 weeks, it'll be done." And I have to mention that my brother passed away. He passed away in April of this year. And I've got, like I said, the 5 older brothers. And I was sitting at my desk on April 4th, and my phone rang. And my brother, Rick, is calling me. And I, "Hey, Rick, what's going on?" He goes, "Got bad news. Dave died." And I go, "Dave who?" It didn't dawn on me that he could pass away. And the reason is that my brother ran marathons. He has run sub-3 marathons. I've run marathons, sub-4, meaning that I've never run a marathon faster than 3 hours. He was in very good health as far as his physical conditioning goes. But he'd had an issue earlier where he'd actually had a stroke. And he had the stroke, and at the hospital they said, "It's probably something that you've had a defect for the longest time, probably born with it, and it just manifested itself now. And unfortunately, these things happen, and it could happen again." And his doctor said, "Unfortunately, you will never walk again. The number of people who recover from this stroke and walk again is about 5%. My brother spent a year teaching himself to walk again, and he got up and walked. And he was walking, and he had a very slight limp, but he did it. Went back to the hospital, walked inside, found his doctor, and said, "Just want to let you know, I'm one of the 5%. Doctor said, "Congratulations," shook his hand. Sad part is, a few years later, he had a second stroke. And I think the second stroke really took the wind out of his sails because he didn't tell us about it. I didn't know he'd had the second stroke. My other brothers didn't know. And the people who did know, he downplayed it. Said, "Oh, no, it's no big deal. I just had a little stroke. I'm fine. And then on April 3rd, I got the phone call that he passed away. And I was thinking about, when you have a family member that passes away, he's older than me. So he's been there my entire life. The entire time I've lived on this planet, he's been there. And sometimes we shared a room. Sometimes we lived miles apart. When he passed away, he lived a couple hundred miles away. But of course, nowadays, that's just a phone call. But he'd always been there. And I was just thinking about everything about his life. And I had to write his obituary and plan a funeral. Unspeakable things about somebody that you love that much. As I was thinking about it, the one story that kept coming back to me was that car. Because you have to understand, and I know some people aren't into their cars the way everybody that we think they are should be, but a car to me, growing up in a house with 7 other people, it wasn't a big house. And I'm not saying it was crowded, but sometimes it felt that way. So when I got a 10-speed bicycle, I remember being able to ride around. I have freedom. I can ride around miles away from home. When you get a car, that's freedom, but supercharged. I mean, you can go counties away. You can drive in any kind of weather. You can visit who you want to visit and go places, and all kinds of worlds opened up. And that's what that car did to me, is it was cool to go to school in that car. Previously, I'd been driving a green Gremlin. People made fun of the green Gremlin. They did not make fun of the 69 Dodge Charger. I felt like a hero driving that car. Now, I know other people didn't look at me like I was a hero, but I felt like one. And it goes back to Dave saying to me, save up your money, I'll help you buy a car. And I literally thought that meant as test drive, kick the tires, pop the hood, tell me something about it. And in reality, it was no. I'm going to put you into a really cool car. It's not going to cost you a lot of money, but a really, really cool car. And I really do believe that if you look at the trajectory of my life, with my profession, with my career, with my hobbies, everything I've done, on some level, you go back to that moment in time when I got that car, and that could not have happened without my brother Dave.
I'm at the Lars Anderson Auto Museum, home of America's oldest car collection, and they are holding a sweepstakes where one of you is going to win this Porsche 992. You can enter at the link in the description below, and you will have an amazing car, but much more importantly, you'll be helping keep America's car culture alive. The Lars Anderson Auto Museum is the hub of New England car culture, and that is why every week here on the grounds, there's something amazing happening. So if you're in the Boston area, come say hey, and either way, enter to win this thing because it's awesome.